Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lord Gord Podcast. This is your host, Lord Gord. I'm giving you information that's factually correct and politically incorrect. And girl, why'd you go away? Can I say to make you stay? Hey, now, girl, I was a fool. I don't know what to do, no. I'm still in love with you. Still in love with you. Still in love, baby. Still in love with the listeners. So this week, I don't even have notes. I've got them all in my head this week. I'm doing a little profile on some culture warriors. Some people that have been out there for a long time fighting this fight. Because personally, I've been thinking about it, and this stuff is exhausting. I mean, I remember so much information, so much facts, and I watch so many people doing it, so many newer people doing it too. Tim Pool, even though he still says he's on the left, he'll come around to our side eventually. You know, these guys, I have so much appreciation for them because day in and day out, they're just going against tyranny and just lunacy. I'm going to get into Thomas Sowell a little later, but so many of these ideas are being pushed, like discrimination is the reason for differences in black and white income. Women get paid 70 cents on the dollar. I mean, these things have literally been disproven 30 and 40 years ago. And you still have great men like Thomas Sowell, Walter E. Williams just slogging on. Many economists out there just slogging on. Even though papers like New York Times, Washington Post, they just lie and obfuscate and deceive the American people. So this is just an appreciation today of a few culture warriors, man. The first culture warrior I'm going to discuss is David Horowitz. David Horowitz is a white Jewish man. I believe he was raised in New York. His parents were card-carrying communists. They never admitted that publicly, but they were part of the Democrat Party, the Progressive Party, but they were a secret communist. And his mother had like a secret pen name that she'd use to, pen communist propaganda. So this guy ends up going to UC Berkeley around the 50s, 60s, and he ends up becoming a new leftist. He ends up joining up with the Black Panthers. He raises $100,000 for them to buy like an old Oakland church, and the Black Panthers converted it to a school. And David Horowitz helped the Black Panthers find a bookkeeper. Her name was Betty Van Patter, something along those lines. And what really made David Horowitz go from left to right, or what started this process for him, was that he knew Betty Van Patter was murdered. And just based on what he knew about the Black Panthers and how they operated, they're really a criminal organization. They're pimping people, selling drugs. They were thugs. They were communist thugs. He concluded that they killed Betty Van Patter because the police department had found her body in like the river or something like that. And that's really what started. That's really what made him start distancing himself away from them. And he would see that prominent people in Hollywood and whatnot would support these murderers. And he even talked to some people in the Panther Party that reaffirmed his belief that Betty Van Patter was murdered by the Black Panthers. For example, he used to have lunches with Huey Newton, and one lunch, Huey Newton, unprompted, just goes and says, "Yeah, we killed Betty. We killed her." And then he saw a book from another Panther maybe some years later, and she admits to a lot of the wrong things that the Black Panthers used to do. He talks about how Huey Newton was a criminal. I've read about this, how he used to steal cars, and he fled to Cuba because he killed like an 18-year-old prostitute. I forget what made him come back. I think it was the fact that like an activist judge had got put on the court, and Huey felt like that judge was going to be soft on him, so he came back. But David Horowitz really started looking at his ideology after that, and he started seeing the death, destruction, and decay that this ideology promoted and resulted in. And he first voted for a Republican in 1984 for Ronald Reagan, and he felt that voting for a Republican was even more difficult than distancing himself from the progressive New Left, radical communists, so on and so forth. And the reason why he voted for Reagan is because he saw what a disaster Cuba was. And he saw that the left at that time was promoting Nicaragua, and the Sandinistas were communists. They were sponsored by the Soviet Union. And he said, you know what, I made a mistake 20-something odd years ago. I'm not going to make this mistake. So what David Horowitz has been doing for such a long time, he's had many foundations, places he's worked for, Ramparts. He's got the David Horowitz Freedom Center now. And he still tours, man. He goes all across the country. He goes to the belly of the beast in these college campuses. And he goes out with brass balls. And he tells people the truth. He says that the Democrats are a racist party. You know, people like Ta-Nehisi Coates, I believe, received a Pulitzer Prize as just a screeching racist. He goes on to say just how bad these communist socialist ideas are. And just how the left-leaning people are not motivated by incentives and deterrence. They're motivated by goals, and they have a fundamentally different view of human nature, whereas conservatives, libertarians view humans as fallen, and they will do the wrong thing if they have the leeway to, and what keeps them in line are incentives and constraints. The progressive view, the leftist view, is that men are just naturally good, and it's society that corrupts them. This is the reason why they don't blame criminals for crime. I think this is one of the main reasons why, at least with most American blacks, people like Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell, black conservatives / libertarians that speak out against this culture of violence, dependency, and immorality, those people are hated more and are less likely to be defended than the criminals and the drug dealers, so on and so forth. Because the criminals and the drug dealers, they're just a victim of society. They're a victim of white racism. There's all these excuses for these people. It's not that these people are agents. It's just that disposition is your destiny. Because you're born in this situation, you have to be this way. Versus someone like Larry Elder or Thomas Sowell, they actively reject that. They reject that worldview, and they say, the responsibility lays on you and the ideas that you follow in your head, and they don't like that too much. David Horowitz, I like him. Ben Shapiro's someone I like, but Ben Shapiro likes to say, I'm not like David Horowitz. Like, dude, David Horowitz convinces people, because David Horowitz just goes out there and he tells the truth. He goes out there and says, for 50 years, all the high crime areas have been run by Democrats. All the worst areas in the United States for black people are run by Democrats. They're racist. And he talks about how the teachers unions, they use blacks and Hispanics as cannon fodder to grow their political base and enrich themselves. And they don't allow the parents and the students to choose the schools that they'd like to go to, because they have a monopoly on the students. They're making exorbitant amounts of money. I had a podcast about this: leftist teachers, leftist press, leftist lies. You'll see the billions of dollars that are spent by these school districts on a yearly basis. And the fact that the teachers union is one of the largest donating blocks to the Democrat Party. They hold an incredible amount of political power. And I've seen their propaganda in action. They at the point of a gun, they send kids to places like Crenshaw High, where only 3% of the kids can do math at grade level. Everybody knows Crenshaw High School. I know Crenshaw High School. I know people who went to Crenshaw High School. They know that's a gang prep school. Most of the kids there are not interested in learning. They're interested in smoking weed, getting girls, anything except academics. It is not the place that you want to go if you're interested in academics for the most part. And these people force you to go there instead of letting the parents choose. I've discussed this as well. They actively try to limit the number of charter schools to get them closed down, because that's the end of their business. And David Horowitz just goes out there and calls them out for it. So I'm going to play you guys a little clip of the great, I call him King Horowitz, the great David Horowitz speaking. Check it out.
Who was Betty?
Betty Van Patter was, that's Betty Van Patter. Betty Van Patter was 42 years old in that picture, which was taken around 1974. She was a woman that I had asked to do bookkeeping for a school for the Black Panther Party that I had raised a lot of money for. I raised over $100,000 and bought a church in the East Oakland inner city. And there were 150 students in the school. They were, ages 3 to 9. And Betty took the job, and in December 1974, shortly after that picture was taken, she disappeared. And a month later, in January, the police fished her body out of San Francisco Bay with, she had her head bashed in. And at that point, I knew the Panthers, the Black Panther Party, which had been called the vanguard of the revolution by the New Left, America's Viet Cong by Tom Hayden, celebrated by people like Leonard Bernstein, who raised millions of dollars for it. I knew they had murdered Betty Van Patter, and that was the end of my career in the left.
How did you know that?
I knew it because her daughter called me about 4 days after she disappeared, saying her mother had disappeared, and can you help me to find her? And I called Elaine Brown, who was the head of the Black Panther Party then. And Elaine, and I've described in the book, I actually tape recorded one of my conversations with Elaine, and I printed that in the book. Elaine ripped into Betty. Here was a white woman who had disappeared. The black, I said the police will be looking. The Panthers, of course, we believed were a very surveilled and party, and that the FBI wanted to destroy. That was the mythology. But Elaine, instead of being concerned and trying to find her, started attacking Betty and accusing her of being from the CIA, which was laughable. And I just got a sinking feeling. I denied it to myself that they could have killed her at that point because it had so many implications for my life. Then I talked to her daughter, Tamara, and she, told me what the police had found out. And, she hadn't taken her credit cards. She hadn't taken her birth control pills. They had interviewed the friends that she had. Nobody knew where she was. Then I also knew, and I put that together with what I knew about the Panther Party and how it was run. And I knew before she was discovered that they had done it. And then afterwards, since I knew so many people in the party, people who had fled, although I didn't realize exactly why they were fleeing. It happened again, with Jim Jones Temple. People fled, and I remember talking to Daniel Ellsberg at the time. He was going to go to Guyana, and I said, I understand that when people flee, you have to pay attention. But in those days, I wouldn't have paid attention. But they contacted me about a year later, and I talked to them and other people, and they said that the Panthers had killed her.
Have they ever found anybody they ever accused anybody of specifically of killing her?
It is very difficult when a gang. I also describe in Radical Son a lunch I had with Huey Newton where he told me, he said, Elaine killed Betty. Out of the blue, he just volunteered it. And other reporters have done investigations. Hugh Pearson wrote a book and interviewed me for it, but interviewed others, Panthers in particular. So it's pretty established. The daughter of Betty Van Patter went to a private eye named Hal Lipset, who worked for left-wing lawyers doing their investigations, very well connected in the left. And she hired him to investigate her mother's death, and his conclusion was that the Panthers had killed her.
Where's Elaine Brown today?
She's in Atlanta.
You have no problem accusing her sitting right here?
I've done, as I described in Radical Son, in 1993, Elaine came out with a book, her autobiography, and in it she reveals for the first time, the criminal activities of the Panthers. Peter Collier and I had written about this in our book, Destructive Generation, but this is the first time that, there was authentication from somebody inside the party.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed David Horowitz. Let's check him out. He's got books like Radical Son. He's got the Black Book on the left. There's many different chapters. Lots of seminars on YouTube. There's a channel called TJ Singh that has a lot of great seminars, not only by David Horowitz, Thomas Sowell. There's a lot of great thinkers. And it's just wonderful, man. I really appreciate what David Horowitz has been doing for the past 34 years, because oftentimes I feel like it's a Sisyphean task. I feel like I'm talking, but no one's listening to what I'm saying. I mean, I made predictions about just recently. I told my sister, I said, the Hispanics, both legal and illegal, are going to be used as cannon fodder by the local teachers union in order to limit our freedoms, to extract more money in taxes, and for them to grow their power block. And lo and behold, news report recently says that the teachers might not come back after winter break. They might go on strike. And at the teachers union headquarters, they have like thousands of signs already printed up, mostly in Spanish. I saw some in English, but a lot of them are in Spanish. So like I said, unfortunately, the useful idiot Hispanics, I'm not saying all Hispanics are useful idiots, I'm saying the ones that are being used for this agenda that's going to give their kids a horrible education, going to raise their taxes, going to limit the amount of business coming through, so on and so forth. Those people are going to just be sent out like cannon fodder to fight for these things that seemingly will benefit them, but in the long run would definitely hurt them, the city, the economy, and really the moral fabric as well. Next profile in Culture Warriors would be my man Andrew Breitbart. I used to hear bad things about Andrew Breitbart. Breitbart.com. People say, oh, don't trust Breitbart.com. I like Breitbart.com. Breitbart died a few years ago. I can't remember the year specifically, but Andrew Breitbart, he grew up in L.A., like west side of L.A. Basically everybody, you're a left-winger by proxy. Everybody's a left-winger. And he goes to Tulane University to go study American Studies. By his own admission, he wasn't that great of a student. He used to party and drink all the time. Whenever his friends from L.A. would go to Louisiana, they'd say, oh, come party with us. And he'd go party with them. And he did this thing called American Studies. And he thought they were going to be studying the Constitution, American culture, what makes America great, free market, individual responsibility. He studied the ideas of subverters. He studied cultural Marxism, so on and so forth. And when he got out of school, he came back to L.A. I think he was like working in a restaurant, and, like delivering scripts or something like that. And he thanks grunge rock for his transformation from left-winger to conservative, because he hated grunge rock. So instead, he put on Rush Limbaugh. And everyone around him told him, don't listen to Rush Limbaugh. He's a racist. He's an evil guy. And Breitbart started listening to him. He's like, wait a minute. This guy makes a lot of sense. And that's what I notice a lot of people on the left do. They are huge gatekeepers. They always say, you can't think like this. Don't listen to this person. Don't do this. Don't do that. Dude, go do it. Even if it's the wrong idea. I've talked to people, giving them advice, and I'll tell them, you know what, that's not a great idea, but at the end of the day, you have to figure it out for yourself. The left does not want you figuring out stuff for yourself. They want to think for you. They want to tell you where to work, how much you can work for, where you're going to get your health care from, where your kids are going to go to school. They want to control everything about your life. They want to control thought. That's why they want to control the schools. They want to control thought, and they want to control the money. They want to control the power. So Breitbart credits that for his transformation, and he also saw that during the confirmation hearings for Clarence Thomas, he saw how people like Joe Biden and whatnot were treating Clarence Thomas, and he thought, wait a minute, if Clarence Thomas wasn't conservative, they would be saying that these guys are racist. I thought that these kind of behaviors against black people were racist. He was saying, if this guy is black and they like black so much, why are they so adamantly opposed to him? Why are they so hell-bent on destroying this man's life and reputation? And he saw it because they don't like black people who think for themselves. They don't like black people who stray away from the narrative of resentment, victimology, and hatred. So they wanted to destroy him. And he'd see, I saw him on Bill Maher as well, where Andrew Breitbart literally goes on there and says, you know what, black conservatives are bullied and they're ridiculed for their beliefs. And, Bill Maher, Andrew Breitbart talks about Clarence Thomas, for example, and Bill Maher goes and says, I don't even think he was thinking about it consciously. It was just like a reflex, like Pavlov's dog. He goes on and says, yeah, Clarence Thomas doesn't share the opinion of most black people. Most black people don't agree with Clarence Thomas, which is proof of what Andrew Breitbart was saying, where the left-wingers try to bully blacks that don't accept the dominant narrative, and they're ridiculed, they're shamed, they're called names like a mediocre Negro, field Negro. For example, Derek Bell, the guy, the creator of critical race theory at Harvard, he was going. This was late '80s, early '90s, something like that. He was going on strike because Harvard didn't have another black law professor. He said, "I'm not coming back until they get another black law professor, but I don't want someone who's black but thinks white." It's racist. So in other words, he's saying if you don't believe in the narrative of black victimization and big government, and the only way that blacks can get out of poverty is through these massive government programs that don't work, by the way. I've touched on that many times before. Then don't hire them. It's the epitome of racism. So that's really what changed Andrew Breitbart's mind on this stuff. And then he started looking into the stuff he was studying in college, because I can attest to this myself. After college, I mean, I used to read a lot in college, but I read a lot more, and I'm a lot more interested in learning, especially because I'm learning about things that I want to learn about outside of college than I ever was in college. He really started looking at these guys that they're reading. These guys are all from the Frankfurt School. These are cultural Marxists. They understand that economic Marxism didn't work because the facts are obvious. I mean, I can point to so many examples. I've done that before. So he said, you know what, we have to turn groups against each other. Most people want to be rich and prosperous, so poor people won't hate rich people, but we can make blacks hate whites. We can make women hate men. We can make Hispanics hate whites. It's all about this oppressor, oppressed, and some of the buzzwords, marginalized group, oppressed class, critical race theory, a lot of these other ideas really are what this stuff's about. And really what it's about is just subverting the culture and creating a socialist state by pitting many different groups against one another and having them destroy one another and having them vie for power, and also having them believe that the only way to success is through a large and obtrusive government. Because any of these groups you see advocating for social justice, equality, diversity, inclusion, any group that you see that advocates for that, first and foremost, always favor big government. Doesn't fail. Black Lives Matter, for example, they want like huge reparations. They want like white people to give their house to black people. Jesse Lee Peterson was right. They really are radical black lesbian communists. Like, that's what they are. That's what they're founded by, period. And so many groups like that, the Haraza, Black Lives Matter. I'm trying to think of other groups that told this cultural Marxist paradigm. But dude, it's almost everywhere. I went to a meeting somewhere at this union, and literally they're talking about the same thing: privileged, oppressed group, and marginalized group, and all this stuff. And I'm like, yep, that's that cultural Marxist stuff. It's designed to create hatred and resentment. It's designed to have people think that the only way to equalize things is through a large and oppressive government. So, Andrew Breitbart did a lot of great work. He started Breitbart.com. He also helped Arianna Huffington start the Huffington Post. And Arianna Huffington is one of the few people I know that went from right to left. And Andrew Breitbart did that because he wanted people to see just how insane left-wingers were. And I think like the first week that the Huffington Post was out, you just saw all kinds of crazy ideas that were considered fringe. People were saying, oh no, this is fringe. No one thinks this stuff. You start seeing a lot of articles of these people just advocating for mass redistribution of income, so on and so forth. And Arianna Huffington calls Breitbart and it's like, okay, you won. Because Breitbart wanted to show people, like, listen, these leftists, they claim that they're not for these radical positions in public. When they go run for office, if you're Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's insane, she has these rallies that are closed off to the public with a bunch of illegals and stuff in there, because they're telling them one thing, and then when they go on TV, even though her message on TV is a socialist message, it's even worse when she's in private. So a lot of these people, Project Veritas exposed this a lot. You saw people like Claire McCaskill, who in public is talking about, I support gun ownership, but in private it's like, yeah, I want to like take people's guns away. In Huffington Post, it's supposed to be this left-wing website. All the left-wingers talk with each other and publish articles and whatnot. They were providing us with the evidence to show people how insane these people were, and Andrew Breitbart did a great thing because of that. So now I'm going to play a little clip from Andrew Breitbart speaking with a racial agitator at the University of Redlands. Check that out.
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Breitbart.
Thank you.
I have a question and a statement, if you don't mind.
Do the statement first.
Well, my name is Andrea Ortega, and I'm a sophomore here at the university, and I'm very liberal. So I came here for one of my classes because we were encouraged to come with an open mind, and that is what I did come with. And a part of my statement is that you say that you're speaking from diversity, but then at the same time, you're making statements like multicultural diversity crap, and you make several statements that are very hypocritical of the position that you have, like black people referring to them as Uncle Toms, and referring to your
What was your reading comprehension score? That is what the left calls black conservatives if they disagree with the liberal orthodoxy.
My statement.
Yes, yes. What's your question? I'm fine with it. I love this.
I just don't understand why you're saying that you are for diversity when you are making so many racial undertones about diversity and how racist you are being about racism. You're saying that...
This was the type of stuff why one must reject the post-structural. No offense, you are the definition of the indoctrination and you don't even understand what you're saying. God help us.
At least give her credit for bravery.
I do. I
am not going to accept that comment because I don't feel that I'm being brave. But I just want to say that if you want college students to understand your campaign, you're going to actually have to follow through with how open-minded you say you're being.
Where's the question? What's the question?
Well, I was going to ask something, but I feel that you're not going to listen to what I have to say. Well, my question was originally about the diversity stuff, and then you guys just started talking in the middle of what I was saying.
I understand the language, and you're implying that I'm racist. Okay? And that is what you are. That is going to be the sum total of your education as you go out there, and you're not going to be able to make anything. And that's what I graduated with my American Studies degree, the ability to judge other Americans as not being sufficiently tolerant because they didn't agree with the left's definition of tolerance. And I'm telling you this is that you need to understand what multiculturalism is and what political correctness is. And it is cultural Marxism. And it is the translation of Marxist theory from, instead of the haves versus the have-nots. It didn't work in this country. So they created the oppressor versus the oppressed. And so they pitted people in the name of diversity, where they pit Hispanics against each other. Do you know what La Raza is? Do you know what the Reconquistador movement is? It is a racist movement in this country. What about the New Black Panthers, who are supported? They're racist. And the definition of racism is only white people can be racist because black and Hispanics can't be. That is malarkey. They have you thinking in terms of race. They have you thinking in terms of race. Everything is race. There was a world before this that was created. The buildings that were made here were made by people who didn't graduate their colleges obsessed with race. They learned through math. They learned through science how to improve. I'm answering. You had your statement. You had your statement, and I am answering it. You do not interrupt me. This educational system is going to fail you. You will not be able to invent a widget, and you certainly won't be able to build it in this country anymore. They have ruined. I am the ultimate example. I graduated from college believing exactly as you believe, and I walked in from the theoretical world into the real world and realized if I wanted to put rice on the table and pay for my rent, I better get out of this victimhood mentality, and I did. And listen to Hispanic conservatives. Listen to black conservatives. I'm the guy who has many people on the right saying, what are you doing on the Go Proud advisory board? If you can't be gay and conservative, then I'm not conservative. If you are, it doesn't even make sense to me. If you believe in fiscal conservatism, if you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe in a strong national defense, I want you on my team. That's where I'm coming from. And so you are brainwashed to think I am a racist, and you think I'm speaking in code terms. I don't think I could be any more explicit. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And I believe to the core of my being that this country will be destroyed by people like you who think you are doing good while you divide. You divide into separate different categories, and we pit against each other. There should be no Congressional Black Caucus. There should be no Latino caucus. Pluribus unum. E pluribus unum beats multiculturalism. That's it.
My main point was that...
You already had your main point. You already did. You had an enormous amount of time. It's unfair to the people behind you. It's unfair to the people behind you. Woo!
All right, hope you guys like that. You know, Andrew Breitbart's greatly missed. If only he was still around today, because that guy had clout, man. He had some brass testicles, you know. One last point on Breitbart. There's this whole conspiracy theory perpetrated by the mainstream media, the leftist press. He's the one who started calling them the Democrat media complex. He's the one who started pointing out, hey, like, all these people are like left wing, the far left, and they're all in cahoots with one another. And they're, you know, the mainstream media is real soft on Democrats and real hard on Republicans or right wingers, and they give a lot of cover to their bad ideas. And he was saying that the media is incredibly biased. They had, you know, the main dispensers of this stuff is academia, which is college, mainstream media, and Hollywood. You know, so check out some of his presentations. He did The Politics of Hollywood with the Hoover Institution, you know, many years ago before he died. So check that stuff out. But I was going to touch on the whole Tea Party movement. The mainstream media was saying, oh, you know, the Tea Party is racist, so on and so forth, and they were yelling racial epithets at members of the Black Caucus during their rally. And Andrew Breitbart said, hey, man, I'll offer you guys $100 grand. $100 grand. If you can produce any evidence of these racial epithets being said. And this is in a time where everyone has cell phones, everyone has a camera. One person, 100 grand. No one has claimed the money because they lie. Period. What's the example of the mainstream press lying, man? Quick example would be Donald Trump when he was calling MS-13 animals and savages because they are an extremely brutal and evil group of people. They said, oh, Donald Trump's calling Mexicans animals. He's calling illegals animals. No, he wasn't. He was calling MS-13, the gang members, animals. So they do that kind of stuff all the time. Another quick example was Paul Joseph Watson, great culture warrior. I'm not profiling him today, but Paul Joseph Watson is great. I love that guy. He publishes a video of like a GIF image of Jim Acosta, you know, like touching the girl, you know. He has the mic and Trump saying, that's enough, put down the mic. So the girl's going for the mic and Jim Acosta just takes her hand and does this. And you had all these stories from these mainstream outlets saying, oh, right-wing conspiracy guy Paul Joseph Watson publishes doctored video. Sarah Sanders uses doctored video as evidence. He shows you in his video that it's not doctored. He shows you the original video. You can go on C-SPAN and watch the original video. You notice that no one in the mainstream press asked the girl what happened. They didn't even ask anyone in the room what happened. They were clearly lying, and they lie all of the time. Last person I'm going to discuss today is my main man, Thomas Sowell. My favorite author, one of my favorite thinkers, a man that has changed my life. Thomas Sowell, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, economist, former professor at schools like Cornell, Amherst, UCLA, Rutgers. This man has authored many books, the most recent being Discrimination and Disparities. He's authored classics Basic Economics, Black, Redneck, White, Liberal, Intellectuals in Society, Conflict of Visions, Vision of the Anointed. I've gotten so much information from that man. That man has shown light into my world, but this man has been doing it for 40, almost 50 years. Is combating all these false narratives that people still push. For example, Obama and Hillary Clinton pushing this glass ceiling thing, that equal pay for equal work. The fact of the matter is, I think since like the 70s, women that have worked continuously in the labor force and never gotten married make slightly more money than men of the same description. I'm going to play you guys a clip a little later of Sowell in the early 80s talking to a woman, saying, the women are getting paid less than the men. And Thomas Sowell just shuts it down. He's been shutting this stuff down for 40, 50 years, and you still see people repeating the same nonsense. The fact of the matter is that men and women take up different professions, and they work different hours, and more importantly, when women marry and have children, they work less hours to be with the kids. I've looked at data that shows that only a quarter of women want to work full-time. 75% either want to stay at home with the kid or work part-time. So let's keep going with Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, he grew up in Harlem. He went to Harvard for undergrad. I believe for graduate he went to Columbia, and he got his PhD in economics at the University of Chicago. And he studied under great people like Milton Friedman. And even though he was learning about all these economic principles and applied economics, so on and so forth, he was still a Marxist. He became a Marxist because in his youth, that was the only idea he was exposed to. He read about it in an encyclopedia, and he would see how he'd go from the nice area where well-off people lived and where the slum he lived at, and Marxism was the only explanation he had seen. So even after studying under the great Milton Friedman, he was still a believer in Marxism. But what changed his mind is when he had worked as an intern for the Department of Labor and in Richport, and he saw that there was two arguments about why there was more unemployment in Richport. He said either one, there's the classical economic argument espoused by people like Milton Friedman, was saying that price floors create surpluses because they price low-skilled people out the market, therefore creating a surplus of unemployment. Or what the Department of Labor was saying was that, there wasn't as much work because the hurricane wiped out a lot of the sugar canes. So Thomas Sowell for the whole summer was thinking about a way in which to test this hypothesis against facts. And he came up with an idea. He said, wait a minute. If I can go to the Department of Agriculture and I can get data on how much sugar was in the field before the hurricane and after the hurricane. And he expected to get congratulations and applause by his colleagues, and all he got were looks of shock and consternation, because the man has stumbled upon something that would ruin them all. The minimum wage law was responsible for 1/3. Enforcing the minimum wage law was responsible for 1/3 of all funding to the Department of Labor, and these people did not want to let go of their jobs. So it didn't matter whether the minimum wage law created unemployment or not. What mattered to them was keeping their jobs and keeping the cash flow coming. And that is when Thomas Sowell understood that these government agencies and these people working for government are human beings, and they have their own incentives, and that people are driven by incentives and deterrence. So all this nice stuff they say that they're doing for people, first and foremost, it's about lining their pockets. When I did my podcast about Hispanic Detroit, I talked about why the government bureaucracies like the illegals and why the welfare agencies like the illegals because they're disproportionately on welfare. I surveyed a study, I haven't read it all yet, but they were saying something along the lines of like 7 out of 10 non-immigrant households use some form of mean-tested welfare. Just insane stuff. And what I'm saying is, you know, these people working for the welfare bureaucracy, they don't want people to get back to work. They don't want jobs to be created in abundance because the less people on welfare means the less cash flow coming to them, the less jobs they have, and the less political clout they have. Now, you tell me where you'd see a group of people who willingly want to give up money and power. I'll wait. So Thomas Sowell came around to being a conservative / libertarian based on experience and what he was taught. But what he was taught did not sway him. It was his experience. And once he experienced that, then all the stuff he was taught started to make more sense. And he came around and has written so many great books. And he's educated and inspired millions of people. And so many people, like myself, are indebted to Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell had like a whole trilogy of books on race and culture. I've learned so much about race and culture from him. I just finished a book called Affirmative Action Around the World, an empirical study by Thomas Sowell. And it shows that the rationales for affirmative action and the outcomes of affirmative action are similar whether you're in Southeast Asia, you're in India, you're in the United States, or even Nigeria. And it goes to show you that ideas have consequences. You know, the incentives and constraints of an idea and a thought process really dictate the results more so than the intentions, right? So I'm going to play you guys a little clip.
We have with us Mrs. Harriet Pilpel, who's well known to this viewers of this program. Mrs. Pilpel is an attorney with Greenbaum, Wolf and Ernst, a graduate of Vassar and of the Columbia Law School, and very active in a number of liberal and feminist movements. Mrs. Pilpel.
I would like to, for a moment, ask you some questions about the economics of job getting in terms of the blacks versus the whites. The statistics I was able to pull together indicate that at the present time, white males make $17,427 on an average basis for the year. Black males make $12,738. White females make $10,244, and black females make $9,476. It is clear from these figures, as indeed I think it's clear to most of us from what we see, that there is a discrimination against blacks and against women in our present system. Since not all blacks will be superior, how would you try to even that out so that there would be some equality of job opportunities?
I'm sorry you missed the earlier part of the program when I pointed out that where you find people not represented evenly, that does not show the institutional effect, because almost nowhere in human affairs do you find people evenly represented. Well, if you compare comparable people with respect to age, with respect to education, etc., you get a totally different picture, both with respect to blacks and women. Now, the figures that I saw, for example, show more recently that if you take black families where the husband and wife are both college educated and compare them to a white family where the husband and wife are both college educated, the black family is now earning $2,000 a year more. The problem is that very few blacks fall in that category. That when you compare category for category, then we're talking about getting people a decent education. I'm saying that you cannot say that numbers collected at the employer's place of business reflect simply the employer's policies. Those numbers reflect underlying conditions in the whole society, just as numbers collected at a hospital do not show you that the people are sick because they're in the hospital.
No, I would agree with that, but you would also have to agree that, generally speaking, women are paid less, for example, for the same jobs as men.
No, I would not. I would not agree with that. If you're talking about women with the same number of years of experience, with the same continuous service, etc., then when I look at that, I don't find that disparity. I find, for example, in many cases, the women are making more, depending on how you break the data down. The difference with women is between married women and everybody else. That's the real difference.
Well, even as to single women, the Census Bureau statistics, the most recent ones I could find, 1978, say that single men are earning $11,100 and single women are earning $9,300.
Yes, I love the word single that is used. When I did my study, I didn't use single, I used never married. You see, a woman who is single at age 40, having spent 10 or 20 years raising children, is really not quite the same as a man of age 40 who's been working continuously for 20 years.
And the differential she cited is not that great, so he could easily be accounted for by the
Yes, because when I break them down the other way, I did this for the academic world, and there I found the women who are never married, which is the term the way I take it. There they were earning more than the men. And similarly, when the government did data some years ago on women who had been working continuously since high school into their 30s, there you found that they were making slightly more than men of the same description. So the difference is between married women and everybody else. And married men get an extra bonus because their wives take care of many things that enable them to put more time into their careers.
I'm sure you're aware of the fact that there are approximately 15% of all homes in which there is only one wage earner. So that when you talk about women being able to take care of things for their married mate wage earner, the fact is that in the overwhelming majority of American homes, the women also work. And therefore, I don't think your explanation that women have other responsibilities and that's why they are...
Work can mean part-time work or full-time work. Women do not work full-time to the same extent that men. Part-time workers make less than full-time workers.
Thank you for listening to the Lord Gord Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, share it with a friend. Get the Lord Gord album, This Isn't TV, on iTunes, Spotify, Tidal, Google Play, so on and so forth. Next week, I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite songs. It's going to be very difficult because I have so many songs that I like so much, but I'm going to just narrow some down that I really, really, really enjoy and mean a lot to me and that I have a lot of history with. So I hope you guys stay tuned for that. Have a Merry Christmas, because when the next podcast comes out, it'll be after Christmas. So have a Merry Christmas. All right, I don't do that Happy Holiday stuff. We're a Christian country. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Lord Gord. I'll talk to you next time.